The sky above the wide green jungles of Vorthis broke open with a roar so loud it made the ground shake like an earthquake. And Karail, a young scout of the Syrinx people, felt every feather on her body stand straight as fear rushed through her. She had grown up hearing stories about the terrible creatures known as apex beasts, monsters so strong that even whole armies failed to stop them. Beings that lived through dying stars and hunted anything that moved, but she never believed she would see one with her own eyes. As the sky tore apart like a curtain made of fire, something black and massive fell from the heavens, dropping toward the forest like a burning meteor. Trees bent, animals ran, and even the wind seemed to run away as the creature landed, crushing huge trunks under its weight as if they were nothing but dry sticks. Karail hid behind a fallen log, her heart pounding so fast she feared it might burst. And she watched the monster rise to its full height, its skin thick like stone with bright orange cracks glowing between the plates. Its head was long with sharp metal-like horns, and its eyes burned like molten lava. It sniffed the air, and Karail froze, knowing the beast was looking for something to kill. She knew she should fly away, but her wings were folded tight in terror, and her legs felt like heavy stones. The apex beast turned toward her hiding place, the ground trembling under each step it took, and she understood she was trapped with no way to escape. It lowered its giant head and opened its jaws wide, showing rows of glowing teeth that could cut through steel. Karail covered her face with her arms, waiting for pain, waiting for darkness, waiting to die. But then the ground shook again, not from the beast, but from something else falling from the sky. A metal figure dropped like a hammer, landing between her and the monster with a loud crash that sent dust and leaves into the air. At first, she thought it was another beast, but then she realized it was a human wearing a damaged suit of armor, the blue light from his visor shining through the smoke. Humans were rare on Vorthis, and they were small compared to many alien races. Yet the one standing in front of her looked like a wall, strong and steady, even with cracks in his armor and sparks flying from his gauntlets. The apex beast growled at the human, shaking the trees, but the human did not step back. Instead, he rolled his shoulders, cracked his knuckles, and took a calm breath as if he had fought things like this many times before. Karail could not understand how he could be so fearless in front of something that terrified entire worlds. The beast roared and lunged forward, but the human moved like lightning, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. Karail watched with wide eyes, her terror slowly mixing with disbelief, because this human did not act like prey. He acted like a true predator, one that would not run, one that would not break, one that stood between her and death without hesitation. In that moment, as the human faced the apex beast with nothing but his two fists, Karail felt a strange and powerful certainty rise inside her, a feeling she could not explain. She felt safe, as if something unstoppable had arrived. She did not yet know who he was or why he had come, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity. This human was different. The apex beast attacked with a sudden furious leap, its huge jaws snapping shut with a sound like two giant stones crashing together. But the human moved with surprising speed, sliding under the bite as if he had trained his whole life for this moment. Karail watched with her heart hammering as the human caught the beast's lower jaw with one hand and pushed it upward with strength that seemed impossible for a being of his size. The beast's skull shaking under the force. Its claws flashed through the air, sharp enough to cut through metal plates. Yet the human twisted away with quick, controlled movements, grabbing one of its thick limbs and pulling it so hard that a loud crack burst through the forest, making the birds flee from the treetops. The beast roared in pain and rage, its glowing orange veins pulsing like fire under its rough skin, but the human did not back away. Instead, he drove his fist into the monster's ribs in a rhythm that looked practiced and deadly. Again and again, each punch sending bright sparks and pieces of bone flying. The force of each strike shaking Carol's tail feathers. She had been raised to believe humans were clever and stubborn, but she had never imagined they could fight like this, not even in old Syrinx stories told to frighten children. The beast spat a long stream of burning fire from its throat, flamed so hot that the air rippled around them. Yet the human walked straight through the fire, his armor melting in some places, glowing red in others, his visor cracked but still shining blue through the smoke. When he stepped out of the flames, the apex beast hesitated for the first time, confused and angry that something so small had not died. The human leapt onto the monster's back, gripping the thick plates of its neck, using every muscle he had to pull himself higher. The beast thrashed and slammed itself into trees, trying to shake him off, but he held on like he was glued to its skin. With a shout that was filled with raw strength and fierce will, he wrapped his arms around the creature's massive skull, planted his feet against its spine, and pulled with every ounce of power inside him. Carl gasped as the world seemed to slow, the beast's body stretching and trembling. Before the human tore its head free in a violent burst of orange light and falling sparks, the monster's heavy body collapsed, shaking the ground as its life faded away, and the forest became silent, the kind of silence that comes after something unbelievable has happened. Carol slowly stood up, her legs weak, staring at the human who had done something her people had once believed impossible. He dropped the creature's head beside her, the loud thud making her flinch, and then he turned toward her, his voice calm and gentle as he asked if she was hurt, as if he had not just fought a creature that could destroy a whole village. She opened her beak, but no sound came out, her mind struggling to understand what she had just seen, because she had witnessed the impossible, a single human defeating an apex predator with nothing but his hands. In that moment, standing before the quiet forest and the fallen beast, she realized she had never seen anything like him, and she doubted she ever would again. Carell followed the human, Captain Leon Hawley, through the quiet forest, still shaken by what she had seen, and as they walked, he began to explain why he had come to her world and why the apex beast had fallen from the sky like a burning rock. His voice was steady but heavy, as if he carried a weight inside him that no armor could protect him from. And he told her about the Devourers, a terrifying race of machine-like beings that fed on suns, turning bright stars into dark, empty shells. He had seen it happen with his own eyes, whole systems falling silent, planets dying in minutes, ships torn open and abandoned in the void like broken toys. Carol listened closely, her chest tightening with fear, because she had heard small rumors carried by space traders, whispers of distant stars going dark and people disappearing, but she never imagined it was true. Leon showed her a small hologram from his arm device, huge black machines wrapping themselves around a glowing star, draining its light until nothing remained but a cold, dead sphere floating in space. Even the forest around them seemed to grow quiet as she stared at the image, and she felt a deep chill run through her feathers. Earth, he said, had been fighting the Devourers for a long time. Humans had built giant ships the size of floating cities, armed with cannons strong enough to crack asteroids. They had created armored suits for soldiers like him, designed to survive battles normal beings could never face. And they had sent men and women across the galaxy to stop the Devourers before it was too late. But even with all that, the Devourers were winning. They were endless, tireless, and cold, moving from star to star like a storm that never stopped. The apex beast that had attacked her was only a scout, a living weapon used by the Devourers to test planets, weaken defenses, and gather information for the main swarm. If such a beast had reached Vorthis, then the true danger was close behind. Carell's wings tightened close to her body as she realized how helpless her people were. The Syrinx had fast ships and sharp claws, but they had nothing that could stop machines that ate stars. She looked up at Leon, hoping he would say something to ease her fear, but he only stared at the sky with a hard expression. When she asked if his team or ship would come to help, his answer made her heart sink. His ship was gone, destroyed by Devour hunters before he could escape, and he had crashed onto Vorthis alone with no backup and no way to call for help. The idea of one human standing against an entire Devourer army made no sense to her. And yet when Leon clenched his fists and said they would not let the monsters take this world, she believed him without knowing why. It was in his eyes, a fire that did not fade even when he spoke of dead stars and fallen friends. She asked him how he could fight something so big and powerful with no army behind him, and he gave her a tired, crooked smile that carried both sadness and unbreakable strength. He told her humans did not need perfect odds to fight for something worth saving. They just needed a reason. And in that moment, as the wind rustled through the trees and the sky darkened with strange, distant shadows, Carol realized that this human, alone and scarred, was ready to face the worst nightmare in the galaxy without hesitation. She felt fear, but also hope, because she understood something deep and true. Humans did not run when darkness came. They chose to stand. The calm of the jungle broke for the second time that day when the sky above Vorthis turned black. Not from storm clouds, but from the endless metal shapes of the Devourer fleet spreading across the heavens like a swarm of giant insects. And Carol felt her breath catch as the darkness grew thicker and heavier with each passing second. Beside her, Leon stood still with his cracked armor and tired eyes, watching the falling ships as if he had seen this nightmare many times before, and Carol realized he probably had. The first Devourer harvesters dropped through the clouds. Huge machines shaped like floating fortresses with glowing orange lines pulsing across their surfaces, and underneath them reigned thousands of smaller machines, sharp-legged creatures that looked like spiders made of black stone, each one ready to devour everything it touched. The air filled with a cold humming noise as the ground began to shake with their landing, and Cyric's villagers in the distance screamed while running toward the deeper forest for safety. Though Carol knew there was nowhere truly safe from these monsters, she looked at Leon, expecting him to tell her to run too, but instead he stepped forward, lifting his damaged arms with a steady confidence that she could not understand. "Stay behind me," he said, not shouting, just speaking like a man who already accepted the weight of what he had to do, and she could only nod, her wings trembling. The first wave of Devourer machines hit the soil with metallic thuds, their glowing eyes locking onto the two figures standing alone in the clearing, and then they charged forward with frightening speed. Leon ran toward them instead of away, meeting the machines in a violent clash that made sparks burst into the air. He grabbed the closest spider-like machine by one leg and twisted, snapping it off before smashing the metal body into the ground so hard that the glowing core inside shattered like glass. Another machine leapt at him from the side, its sharp legs cutting deep into his armor, but he turned and punched through its chest, pulling out the burning core and tossing it aside. More machines surrounded him, moving in a circle like predators around prey. But Leon was not prey, and he proved it with every strike. He slammed one machine into another, crushed a third beneath his heel, and threw a larger one so far that it rolled across the ground until it crashed into a tree. Carol watched with wide eyes, unable to look away from the impossible strength in front of her, because she knew that even a full squad of Cyric's warriors would be torn apart by just a handful of these machines. Yet this one human fought against dozens, maybe hundreds, as if the impossible was simply another challenge set in front of him. Even as more machines landed around them, and even as his armor broke open in several places, revealing bruised and bleeding skin, Leon did not stop, did not slow, did not falter. Each cut, each blow, each impact only seemed to make him fight harder. Carol saw fear in the machines for the first time. They had no emotions, no souls, no hearts. Yet something in their movements changed, as if even cold, empty minds could sense danger. But they kept coming, wave after wave, and Carell understood with growing dread that this battle could never be won through strength alone. They were too many. Leon knew it too, yet he fought on, holding back the endless tide with nothing but will, because that was what humans did. They faced impossible odds and refused to fall. Carell felt her fear slowly turning into awe as she watched him stand like a lone wall in front of an entire army. And even as more shadows fell from the sky, she knew that Vorthis still had hope as long as this human remained standing. Leon and Carell ran through the shaking forest toward the Heart Tree, the oldest and most sacred place on Vorthis, while the ground behind them burned under the claws and beams of the Devour machines that chased them without pause. And Carell felt her heart pounding with both fear and hope, because Leon had said that the Heart Tree held the only power strong enough to hurt the giant Devour command ship hovering above the planet. When they reached the clearing, the Heart Tree stood glowing with bright blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat, its roots spreading wide and deep, carrying ancient energy older than any living race. And Leon stared at it with the look of someone who had already made his decision long before he spoke. The Devour machines gathered at the edges of the clearing, circling like a pack of metal wolves waiting for the right moment to strike. But Leon paid them no mind as he opened the cracked plates of his armor and pulled out cables, connecting them directly to the glowing roots of the great tree. Carell gasped, knowing that no living being could survive that much raw energy flowing through their body. But Leon only gave her a small smile, tired yet steady, as if he had already accepted the pain he would endure. She told him he would not survive, that the tree's power burned everything it touched. And he nodded gently, saying that maybe that was true, but someone had to do it, and he would rather it be him than see her people fall. His voice trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of sacrifice, and Carell felt her throat tighten as she watched him lock the last cable into place. The machines chose that moment to rush forward, their glowing eyes fixed on the two figures beneath the sacred tree. And Leon clenched his fists as the first wave hit the edge of the clearing, firing beams that scorched the earth. The command ship above the clouds lowered slowly, its giant cannon forming a ball of orange light that hummed with deadly power. The Heart Tree answered with its own light, sending a surge of blue energy through the cables and into Leon's body. And he screamed as the force tore through his armor, burning his skin and shaking every bone inside him. Carell stepped toward him, wanting to help, but he shook his head hard, shouting at her to stay back as the power grew stronger. His whole body glowed, cracks forming in the armor, light spilling from every opening. The air around him shook as if the world itself was holding its breath. The Devourer cannon above finished charging, and the deadly orange beam fired downward, cutting through the clouds with terrifying speed. Carell cried out his name, but Leon braced himself on shaking legs, raised his arms toward the sky, and with a voice full of pain, strength, and everything he had left, he shouted one final order to the Heart Tree. The stored energy exploded out of him in a massive beam of blue light, shooting into the sky like a newborn star, crashing into the descending Devourer beam and overpowering it instantly. The blue light pierced straight into the command ship, ripping through its core and tearing the giant machine apart from the inside with a roar that echoed across the entire jungle. The explosion was bright enough to turn night into day for a heartbeat, and all around the clearing, the smaller Devourer machines froze in place as their leader fell. Carell shielded her eyes from the blast, tears mixing with fear and hope as the huge ship broke apart and the pieces fell silently toward the sea in the distance. The attack stopped. The humming stopped. The machines around them went still, lifeless. But Leon fell too, collapsing in front of the Heart Tree with smoke rising from his armor. Carell rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside him, her heart breaking as she saw how weak his breathing had become. He had saved them, saved Vorthis, saved her people, saved a world that was not even his own, because that was what humans did when darkness came. They chose to stand, no matter the cost. The forest lay quiet after the explosion, the smoke drifting gently through the air like fading memories, and Carol held Leon in her arms, her feathers trembling as she felt how weak his heartbeat had become, barely more than a soft tap beneath the cracked armor. His eyes were half open, glowing faintly from the light of the heart tree, and when he looked at her, there was a tired smile on his face, the kind a warrior wears when he knows the battle is finally over. She begged him to stay awake, to hold on, to fight just a little longer, but he shook his head slowly, whispering that some fights were not meant to be walked away from. He told her she had courage worthy of any human soldier, that her people were strong and kind, and that the galaxy needed voices like hers to stand against the dark that still waited beyond the stars. Carol felt tears falling down her beak as she listened, wishing she had the power to save him, but the heart tree's light around them was fading, its ancient energy draining after the mighty blast it had sent into the sky. In the distance, Syric's warriors and villagers slowly came out of hiding, approaching the clearing with wide eyes as they saw the broken machines and the quiet battlefield. And whispers spread among them as they realized a single human had saved their entire world. Some bowed their heads in respect. Others placed their hands on the ground, thanking the heart tree for sending a protector. But Carol barely heard them as she leaned closer to the dying human, her tears falling on his armor, and he gently raised a hand to wipe one away, leaving a faint trail of ash on her feathers. He told her not to cry because humans believe that every star born from darkness was a reminder of someone who loved enough to fight for more than themselves. And then he whispered that maybe, somewhere far beyond the clouds, the friends he had lost were waiting for him. His hand dropped, his eyes closed, and for a moment the whole jungle seemed to hold its breath. Carol pressed her forehead against his chest, listening for any sign of life, and when she heard nothing but the slow rustle of leaves, she let out a soft, broken cry. The Syrinx people gathered around, forming a silent circle as the wind moved gently, carrying the scent of the forest and the fading warmth of battle. They built a place of honor for Leon at the base of the heart tree, wrapping his body in the shining leaves that only grew on its highest branches. And as night fell, the tree sent a soft blue glow across the clearing, as if it were watching over him. Carol stood before the resting place, her heart heavy yet proud, because she knew that Vorthis was safe because of him. And as she looked up at the sky, she saw small streaks of fire-devourer ships, crashing into oceans or burning in the atmosphere without their command ship to guide them. The galaxy would still face danger. The Devourers were not completely gone. But Leon had shown her something she had never understood before. Humans did not shine because they were the strongest or the largest or the most powerful. They shone because their hearts burned brighter than fear, brighter than darkness, brighter than death itself. She touched one of the glowing leaves gently and whispered a promise that she would carry his story across the stars, that she would warn others, and that she would help build a future where no world would stand alone again. And as the night deepened, the heart tree's branches rustled softly, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. And Carol knew that the memory of the human who destroyed an apex predator and defeated an army would live forever, a light that no darkness could ever steal.